Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast, a show designed for brand new sales reps working in the world of tech sales. I'm your host, Neil Buyan, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey on the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast. Did you know that you can watch this show live with the guests on YouTube? This show is available on YouTube at happyselling.io. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to my happy podders and listeners. Welcome to another episode of the SDR DiscoCall podcast / vidcast. Today, I've been really excited to get this guest on board, and I want to give a props to Shaheem Alam for introducing me to this bright spark. I'd love to say hello to Nicolas Griffiths. Nicolas, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Neil?
I'm doing okay. As mentioned before we jumped onto this recording, I had my second vaccination today, so I'm fully vaxxed. So I'm feeling a little bit woozy, but I'm super pumped and ready for today. How about you, sir?
Feeling great. Good to go.
Good. So for the listeners and watchers out there, if you're listening to this on your local podcast network, please make sure that you like and give us a rating. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe below. But Nicolas, for the listeners and watchers out there, could you please tell us, who are you? Where are you based in the world? Where do you work? And what do those guys do?
So I'm based in Vancouver, BC, up here in Canada. And I'm working for a company called Five Rings. They're an outsourced sales company. So other companies come to us when they need help selling their product. And we'll help them to start a LinkedIn campaign, a cold calling campaign, or an email campaign.
I love it. Thank you so much for the introduction. And you should have some tips to share for our listeners out there, because you're a man that's built things from scratch and, you've been successful in it. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. But also, Nicolas, just tell us a little bit about yourself, outside of sales, what do you kind of get up to and what floats your boat?
I'm really into music. I like creating music. I came out with an EP about a year and a bit ago, a one-man band. So I did all the instruments, all the vocals, the mixing, the mastering. It was all me. And that was an incredible experience. I pretty much gave up an entire summer. I'm talking you wake up, get to work, go to bed for a full summer. There'd be days when it'd be beautiful outside, 25 degrees, and I'd just be inside working. But I don't have a single day of regret doing that.
I had no idea that you was into music as well. Funny enough, before we was actually recording this, I was on my podcast mic recording some bars for a hip hop track.
Nice.
So yeah, we might need to collab a little bit later, but we'll definitely save that. Yeah. I love it. So for the watchers out there that are checking us out on YouTube, we're just going to do a quick screen share, and we're going to be visiting your LinkedIn profile, Nicolas.
Yeah.
And before we kind of dive into your experience and kind of your background, I had a question, because for the watchers out there, you can see this old school picture of an old school plane and two guys with their hats up in the air, celebrating. Could you tell us a little bit, what's the story behind this picture, Nicolas?
I'm not exactly sure what the story is behind the picture. I mostly liked it and picked it as my background because I like what it represents. Clearly, this is something these people have been working very hard at, something that started as an idea in their mind. And it looks like the photographer caught the exact moment when these two guys realized that their idea works. And I just love their expression. They've got their hands in the air, childlike ecstasyism, just so pumped that their idea actually worked. So, yeah, and I feel like that's a moment I want to have, preferably every day. But yeah, I like that.
I'm in love with it as well. Like you said, visualizing something in your mind and then seeing it come into fruition, and that feeling of, achieving it. That's how entrepreneurs, dreamers, all sorts, visionaries, that's exactly how it works. And I look forward to the future to seeing what you come up with, sir. But if we dive a little bit deeper down, in terms of your experience, so we can see that you were at the British Columbia Institute of Technology, where you did your bachelor's. You've been a sales associate at Virgin Mobile Canada. You've been a business consultant internship at Procurify. And then you've had a stint for the last year or so at Five Rings Marketing as a BDR, an account executive, and there is some news to come, but also a BDR manager as well. But Nicolas, like in your own words, like if you could walk us through, like take us back to the beginning as to like, studying and then ending up where you were. What's the story, Nicolas?
Sure. I'll start a little bit before that. So I was working at Virgin Mobile out of high school, selling phones at the retail locations. And that was good. It was an all right job. I mean, I got some basic sales training there, basic objection handling, upselling, stuff like that. And I did that for about a year. And then afterwards, I went into business school. And I did that for 3 years. In my time there, there's this competition called the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Challenge. Okay. And they would pit the whole school, or at least anybody that applied to the competition, to come up with an idea and then pitch it in front of a jury or a list of judges, similar to Shark Tank or Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Right. And so I built this carbon fiber electric skateboard. It was just a prototype, but it was working. And at the time, it could hit 30K an hour, and it had a range of 40 kilometers. So, you could get around the city pretty quickly. And I even did the math of how long it would take you to get around the city. And during rush hour, you can get around Vancouver City Center faster than a car, which is outstanding. So I entered with that idea. It was a solo admission that I did. And I got third place in the competition, which was all fine and dandy. It was a $500 prize. But, I wasn't truly satisfied with that. So the next year, I applied again. And this time I had a whole team with me. Nice. And this idea was totally different. It was nothing technology-based. But what we were doing is using spent grain from beer production. And what that essentially is when you make beer, you use a bunch of grain, but when you're done making beer, you have all this leftover wet grain. And so traditionally, what they do with this wet grain is they either put it into the compost because it molds so quickly. It's like warm, it's wet, it's been through fermentation. It's like the perfect place for bacteria to grow. Or they pick it up and send it quickly to a farm where cows or pigs can eat it. So what we were doing was, as soon as the spent grain is done its production, we would dry it out and you could grind that up and bake with it. Now, if you bake with just spent grain, it's pretty awful. I tried to do it myself. I have no baking experience, so that didn't help either. But you ideally want to mix it with a bit of like white flour or multi-grain flour, and that's a lot better. So, yeah, go ahead.
So if we just stop there, so we were just looking at your LinkedIn profile with these guys that have built a plane, and they had this moment of like, aha, okay, we took an idea and it's like come into fruition. Yeah. So you've built like a carbon fiber electric skateboard, which was an idea, and you did the math to see how fast it would take you around the city. Yep. And then you take this existing issue of you using like beer grain, and then again, didn't make it right, but it kind of like you took an idea and you made it into fruition. But you said that you wasn't satisfied. What was it about it that wasn't satisfactory to you?
Third place, man. It's not first, right? First place was $5,000 prize, man. That's 1,000% more than five. Yeah, exactly. It's way more than 500. And so we have the spent grain idea, and we eventually had like a bake off within the team. It was like 8 people within the team, and the girls on the team made it way better. They were like making scones, brownies, cookies. Like it was way better than anything. So, that proved that we could actually make a product that tasted good.
Yeah.
And so we pitched it in front of the panel of judges, and we got first place that year.
So you got to first.
We eventually, we got to first eventually. So that was a fantastic experience. During that time too, so the third place was first year of uni. Second place was second year. My third this is also on the second year. So for Procurify, I did that business consulting internship. Yeah. And this is a pretty clever way to get past the decision maker, the gatekeeper, which was which was what Procurify was struggling with, because they were targeting chief financial officers. They always have a secretary that answers the phone, so pretty much impossible to get to them. So what we came up with, me and my team of 3, is we would mail them something that looks like a gift. It's going to be a nice box, a ribbon on top with the Procurify color scheme and logo on it, right? So when you send this to the CFO, the secretary is going to look like this, going to think nothing of it. He's going to give it right to the CFO. And what we did was we communicated with some manufacturers in China that make these cheap screens it's not a tablet, it's like just a screen that you can that we put underneath the lid of the box with a pre-recorded sales message that we were delivered to the CFO. So extremely custom, right? So if you picture what this looks like, the secretary gets the box, gives it to the CFO. The CFO goes into his office, unwraps it. He's excited. He's giddy. Opens the box, and then boom, our sales video just starts playing for them right there. And he's not going to shut it. He's going to listen. He's going to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
And to test this out, we built a prototype of this box, screen and all, working. And we had one of our friends from BCIT dress up as a delivery man. I wish I had the picture on hand. And we sent it to Procurify. And lo and behold, he got into the building, went up the elevator, gave the box to the secretary gave it to the CFO. It worked like a charm. And they liked the idea so much that they actually invested $20,000 to make this happen. It goes without saying that we got the highest mark in the class for business consulting. We absolutely killed it. We got 95%. The only reason why we didn't get 100 was because our teacher, that was her first year doing this, and she didn't want to her first year already giving out 100%, right?
How did that make you feel?
Oh, I felt cheated. I felt robbed, man. That should have been 100. That was an 8-credit course, man. That should have been 100%. If that isn't it, I don't know what is.
But I love that. That is such because obviously with a lot of SDRs and BDRs out there, like gifting is something which isn't new, but it's a very innovative way to break through the noise, ensure that, you're getting in front of people that are difficult to get in front of. And if you come together as a team and they've spent, what was it, 20K, you say?
20K total. The cost of building this thing was just under $100, and their cost of an MQL was way over $100. So it was still profitable just by doing that.
I love that. Is that something that you still do today? Do you still do gifting in your SDRing or with your team, or have you kind of gone above and beyond that?
No. I mean, what I do now is definitely a lot more traditional, not so much outside of the box thinking.
Outside of the box with the screen. I freaking love that. It reminds me of a story. I think this is something we discussed when we connected a few months ago. When I was working at Showpad, we were doing gifting as well. And our marketing team came up with this cool, it was very cheesy idea of we were trying to reconnect with old lost accounts. People that we had an opportunity, but it stalled and we hadn't heard back from our decision makers.
Right.
So the marketing team purchased 50 bottles of Heinz ketchup. And they put it in a box and they had this physically delivered to all the DMs. And in the card, it was hey, it's been a while. It'd be great to catch up.
Oh, man.
And we got a hell of a lot of responses. It was a really successful campaign. But I love the whole idea of gifting. I've seen people send out cupcakes, personalized bottles and whatnot, or swag. But I think it adds with your example of having a screen that goes into the pitch or the message that you're trying to put in, that personalized element is what really stands out. And I freaking love that. So what happened after Procurify? What was the story then?
After Procurify, I had another year of university to do. I went to a special university. It's not quite a university. It's technically an institute of technology. Okay. But you're able to get a degree in 3 years if you work your ass off. And so, I only had 3 years. I finished my third year of school. And pretty much from the day I finished, a week after, I was already working at 5 Rings. So wow. I had a gig already lined up for that.
And if you
And
don't mind me
yeah,
asking, like, how did you come across Five Rings? What was the story? How did you know about them, and like, how did you get hooked up into it?
well, interestingly enough, to do LinkedIn automation, right? And
Mm.
those same tactics were used to hire people. So she reached out to me on LinkedIn. I later found out this was all automated and done by a computer software, right? So
Yeah.
she reached out to me, went through the conversation, and then we went into a meeting. First interview, second interview, and the rest is history.
Boom.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it. So reached out through the software that you guys like you're selling and helping
yeah,
out with
yeah,
on LinkedIn, and it got you
yeah, for
in. I absolutely
sure.
love that.
Yeah.
So like obviously like with that Five Rings marketing, like you was doing this BDR role, and this is something you wanted to get into. What was it like when you first started out, and what was going through your mind learning the world of tech and this company that's trying to sell this service? Like what was that
Mhm.
initial experience like for you, Nicholas?
Emotionally, at first, it was just pure enthusiasm for like the first couple months, I'd say. I mean, you're just so excited about this new role. You
Mm.
just spent 3 years in school, and now you're finally at the workplace. I had a taste of sales from Virgin Mobile as well, so I'm like, man, I know a little bit about this. Now I'm educated. Let's kill it.
Yeah.
So a lot of enthusiasm there. As far as learning the tech, um, not all. I just spent 3 years learning how to learn, so it wasn't exactly hard to do so either.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, does that answer the question?
It does indeed, Sam. And
Okay.
like with some BDRs, like what they might be doing is they come into a company, they learn the product, they learn the industry, they learn the personas, they may do a bit
Mhm.
of role playing, just to kind of like get them their appetite whet as to like what this world's all about. What kind of like training did you guys go through to like get you on board and get your head in the same space?
A lot of pitch practice. My boss Shaheem, which shout out to Shaheem, 100%.
Yeah.
Like he taught me everything I knew at the time.
Mm.
His a lot of his experience came from door to door selling, so he took that angle at teaching me how to sell on the phones, and it definitely helped. Right, we would do like countless pitch practices, objection handling, stuff like that to get me up to a point where I'd be a fully productive sales rep.
Yeah. I love it. And it's something, like with coaching, doing role plays and doing like pitch practices, this is something I definitely agree with. And, to get you kind of comfortable with it, like, I'm not really a guy that loves doing scripted stuff, but I always think it's nice to have an initial script, with the bullet points to guide you as to how
Yeah.
to say those things and then have a coach to like back you up with it and practice with. But something I've seen in the last year a lot on LinkedIn is people may complain that they hate role plays. They hate like doing these practice things. They just want to get on the phones and do it. In your opinion, like what makes training or like role plays and coaching, valuable? And how important do you think it is for like SDRs and BDRs out there?
No, it's incredibly important. And to their point, like fair enough. No one likes doing role play. It's not an enjoyable experience, but you need to learn how to walk before you learn how to run. It's a great opportunity to just walk through the pitch, learn the steps in an environment that has next to no pressure.
Hmm. I love that. I totally agree. And it's something
Yeah.
I do with I'm doing it with a new team.
Right.
And sometimes when I say, hey, we're going to do some role plays, like eyes roll a little bit. And I'm
I
like,
get it. I get it, man.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't
But
like doing it either. Like I
yeah.
don't like initiating the role play either, but it works and that's why I do it.
Exactly. But I think equally, something that I've learned being a manager and like being a coach is just saying, hey, Nicholas, we're going to do a cold call, like role play, hit me, let's see what you got. I think that is what makes things awkward because it kind of puts the rep on the spot. It feels a bit fake. It doesn't, feel authentic. And their fear is of, being ridiculed or judged. And that's why maybe some people don't enjoy it. But I think, setting a good structure to it. So, for example, if I say, Nicholas, all right, we're going to do a cold call, but the bit that I want to focus on is the skill of that opening up. Maybe if it's the pattern interrupts, something like that. And the
Hmm.
scenario is I am, let's just say, a VP of marketing. I'm within, IT or healthcare. And what I want to do is I want to hear how this goes. And then perhaps we've done a framework. But then also, if I have other members of the team, I'll be like, hey, Alex, so you're going to be like the judge of this. And I want you to hear how he goes through those steps and does he make it? And then I'll say to Alex, okay, so you know what you're doing. Nicholas, do you know what you're doing? And they were like, yep. And then we go 3, 2, 1, action. And I think just adding a little bit of structure rather than spontaneous, I think helps take that awkwardness and hatred out of it. And this is something I've been doing with my new team recently. And they're like, yeah, do you know what? I used to think these role plays were rubbish and, trash and couldn't be bothered. But this is actually helps me feel a bit more realistic and gets me prepped up for the call. So how do you guys like structure it, like when you're doing role plays and stuff?
There's definitely a right and a wrong way to do it, or perhaps let me say a more effective and a less effective way of doing it. There's definitely something to be said about that nice way where you set the table cleanly, everybody knows their roles, and then 3, 2, 1, action. But at the same time, that awkwardness. I mean, what about cold calling isn't awkward, right? Like,
yeah.
You need to be so comfortable with that awkwardness and have the social ability to just maneuver your way around it, elegantly dance around the awkwardness so that you can get your message across. So, there's many ways of doing pitch practice, and I think they each have their ups and downs.
Agreed with you, sir. And I think, the more you do it and the more you expose yourself to it, you get comfortable with the awkwardness and it doesn't feel as scary.
Right.
But let's just say you're my manager, Nicholas, and I'm one of your new BDR reps. And I'm like, Nicholas, I'm feeling really scared about this. I don't know if this is going to work. What advice would you give me to that newbie rep who's just been asked by their manager that you're about to do some practice? What advice would you give to them?
I mean, it would depend where that's feeling of being scared comes from. But in general, like, repetition is going to take away the edge of something being scary. It's called behavioral therapy, I believe. Someone's afraid of heights, right? You expose them to that all the time. It's eventually going to go away. So yeah, repetition is always key, but also, like, just take a moment, man. It's no big deal. Like, we're over the phone. Nothing can hurt you. Worst case scenario, it's going to feel a bit awkward, but you'll get over it. I'm sure they've had much more awkward situations in their life.
Agreed. And I 100% agree. And I was kind of telling one of my reps the other day, like, she's a new rep and she's covering France. She's never worked in tech sales.
Yeah.
And we kind of went through the cold calling, like, role play. And then she says, like, what happens if, like, they're really rude to me, or what happens if they put the phone? I'm like, the reality is you're probably never going to meet them in real life. You're never going to see them. And if they, make fun of it, they may go home to their family and say, hey, I had this really funny call from Lucille. Who cares? Just move on to the next one. And then she was just like, yeah, you're kind of right. And, get a bit of realization. But so obviously, like, we've had that insight from you of, like, being that initial BDR, and then you went into an account executive role. So what was the transition like, and, like, what was you doing as an AE, and what lessons were learned from that, sir?
Right. So I transitioned into an account executive position about 6 months into my role. And I was still doing BDR cold calling. It was like a half and half. I was like half account executive for my company, Fiverr. So I'd be in charge of reaching out to people and getting new clients for my company. And some of the clients that I would bring on were interested in cold calling. And me being the only cold calling rep, that meant I was doing less account executive work and more BDR cold calling. So that's what my experience was. Account executive position is infinitely easier once you've been doing cold calling. It's like you learn how to run and then you go back to walking again. There's, of course it's not the same. There's a few details that need to change and a few more finesses that you need, but the bulk of the hard work has already been done. So I didn't find it too challenging, but there's always new things to learn in this new dynamic.
100%, sir. And here's the thing, like, a lot of the time, like, we get our wings from being BDRing, SDRing, do the day-to-day stuff to get us ready to become those closers. And that's what a lot of SDRs and BDRs I know in my network, they want to dream to aspire to. They want to be that person that closes the deal, gets that commission, get the vibe. And it can sometimes be scary as well. And it's something I really wanted to do. And to be honest, like, when I got into that role, it didn't excite me as much as I thought it would, right? But for those people that are, looking to progress into a closing role, A lot of our listeners, and ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening in, I'm sure that a lot of you want to do this when you first start your SDR job. What advice would you give them to help in that progression, and what things should they consider rather than just, wanting to get promoted? What should they be doing?
So a key part of being an account executive is throughout your pitch or throughout your conversation, learning what matters to your lead, right? So as a BDR, you're learning what matters to your lead so that you can position the meeting that you book as being valuable enough for them to say yes.
Mm.
On an account executive level, you're essentially doing the same thing, but the threshold to action is much higher. It's not 30 minutes of their day. It's however many thousands of dollars a year, right? So it's that same process, but you need to have that process down packed 100%. That's a very important part of that. And the experience you gain as a BDR, that elegant dancing around awkwardness definitely comes in handy as well. But the main point is finding that value that's going to get them to take action.
I love it. That's some solid advice. Thank you, Nicolas. And I think also, to be transparent, sometimes going into this AE role isn't the easiest thing because it's less forgiving than being a BDR, maybe missing your number for a month.
Yeah.
But if you're missing your quota, that's pretty scary as well. And when you're speaking to prospects and you're trying to run through deals and you've got your pipeline, you're trying to pack it out and you're trying to close this and you're trying to do, you have to speak to procurement or you have to get sign off, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of stress that comes with it. And I've lived that stress. But also we can have nightmares with our prospects where prospects are, they're not the nicest people or they're really not convinced. Did you have any horror stories or real big learning curves from being in that AE position, that kind of advice that you'd give out to other people, before coming into that AE position?
I wouldn't say I've had any horror stories, and I'd say that's because of how hard I worked as a BDR. Something that I've noticed is, so as a BDR, everyone is afraid of someone being mean to them over the phone. And that happens more often. Of course, it depends on the industry that you're targeting and on the persona as well. But that happens more often when you're not a talented BDR. If you sound like an amateur, people are going to treat you like an amateur. Eventually, you get to this point where you just sound so professional that nobody is going to be mean to you. Or nobody, So it's just a matter of becoming so good and sounding so professional that people treat you with respect. And that comes with a lot of hard work and a lot of time. For example, I've gone through a journey. I was telling you before we started recording, before I started managing, I've been doing BDR work for about a year. And when I first started, there was no process for cold calling. No one in the company had done that before. Shaheem was teaching me, but this was all, door-to-door advice that he was giving me. So I had to do this on my own. And I've tried, I'm big into, experimenting with different openers. That's how I've been able to maneuver my way around and find something that works. But I've tried everything from that excited opener where you're like, hey, Neil, how's it going? Right. And man, the amount of hangups I got with that was horrendous. It was so bad because now when you hear that, the first thing you think about is salesman down.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll save you everything that happened in between. But now what I found that works best is you want to give off the auditory, appearance that you are a professional, preferably an executive in a high up position, reaching out to another executive in a high up position.
Yeah.
So you want to think about, if the CEO of Coca-Cola calls the CEO of Pepsi, is he going to be like, hey, Neil, how's it going? Right? No, that's not what it's going to sound like.
Yeah.
It's going to sound something a bit more like, hi, Neil, it's Nicolas from Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no how's it going. There's none of that. From there, Neil, you can respond to what I say in whichever way you want. And in that way, I give you full control of the conversation. Because from now on, if you ask me how's it going, that was your decision. You started this conversation. Mm-hmm. I simply just said, hi, Neil. It's Nicholas from Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
You'll usually have like a 1 to 2 second pause or gap where they're trying to think of like, okay, who is this guy? Do I know him? Yeah. How do I want to continue this conversation? And more often than not, you'll get a, hey, Nicholas, how's it going? And now they started the conversation and you're like, oh, I'm doing pretty well. How are you? Then they say, I'm doing pretty well. How can I help you? And then you go right into it. And the way you sound when you say, hey, Neil, how's it going? You want to picture yourself as if either something really good happened to you that morning or you have everything you want in life. And this is going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
For some people, you won 10K this morning, right? How would you sound over the phone if you won 10K this morning?
Freaking happy and positive and just feeling like legit.
Just feeling good. Like you'd sound like, hey, Neil, how's it going? Right? Yeah. You'd sound good, man. You'd sound like you have someone, you sound like you're someone who's got it all figured out. For other people, it might be, you're with your family in your special place, Hawaii, the Bahamas, wherever that is, right? You just want to get yourself into this mindset of you either have everything made or something really good happened to you this morning. How would you sound? From the other end, if you were to pick up the phone, say who you are, how would you sound? And from there, if you get it right, the other person's going to be like, man, this guy sounds happier than me, but not ecstatic over the top, right? He's just calm and satisfied, right?
Yeah.
He sounds good. This guy is a person of value I should listen to. He doesn't sound needy at all. So this is like a year of trial and error, and that's the best I've come up with.
I love that. I absolutely love that because, again, when I was listening to you and to your point, it's this mindset. Because, all right, we'll give you an example. Like it's coming to like mid-month and, you haven't booked as many meetings as you want. You've got this fear of not hitting your quota. So you're then on the phone, you've got these nerves and you're feeling like, oh, hi, Nicholas. Hi, I'm calling from Five Rings Marketing. That nerves will then translate and it'll be picked up by the other person. And to your point, they'll be like, yeah, is this a sales call? And you'll be hit with something like deer in the headlights. And you're like, and then it just all goes south, right? But what you just said is just like putting your mind in the right place to like, be in that happy place. And this kind of takes me back into my days of telemarketing. And I remember used to sitting in this horrible cubicle with this like, phone and with my laptop and having Salesforce in front of me. And I used to be big into motorcycles. And my dream bike at the time was a Honda CBR 600 RR5. And I used to have a picture on it. And before I used to get on the call, I used to look at that picture and said like, do you know what? If I make commish and I hit my targets, that's what I'm going to get. And I'd always imagine myself riding that bike, but as if I already had it. So that when I connected with those hard-ass decision makers, I'd be like, hi, my name's Neil. But it was a lot of trial and error. So I think the question I was going to ask you is like, how do you get into that mindset? But you can build that mindset through visualization. And, if you've pumped yourself up by doing that 10K in the morning, or you've hit the gym, or, you've listened to some pump up music, that's what gets me in the zone. It's the same way before I do a training. I'm either like playing Jay-Z or Travis Scott or like some UK artists like with some grime. And I'm getting myself in the zone so that when I kick this off, I'm ready to rock and roll. And to your point, not being OTT, but feeling confident in myself. So I think that's some great tips there, dude. Thank you. So taking it to the next level, like where you said, if we're going back a little bit, so you came into this company and like you're doing management now. And again, congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
Really happy for you on that, dude. But you said like, this cold calling thing wasn't a thing until like you had to build this out from scratch and you've now been promoted. Like, what was that journey like? And like currently what are you up to now, Nicholas, within this management position?
Yeah, incredibly hard to put it bluntly. It's not easy. So I started working for Five Rings in the summer. It was actually, pretty close to now. It was like end of August, that kind of time. And once we go into winter and there's less sun out and you're getting less exercise and you're taking a lot of rejection, it takes a toll, man. Like let's be real. It takes a toll. And, I've had many points where like my my mental health was just not doing too well. I was in some pretty dark places at some points. And what I realized is that to stay strong and to be able to keep pushing, for me, exercise was incredibly important. If I got that in, I had the mental strength to keep my composure throughout the entire day. And then that was also around the time I started really figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So these new techniques I'm working on, plus the exercise to keep my mind fresh and spry, plus the lower quantity of bad calls that I'm having because I'm getting better, allowed me to come out of this nosedive and then just go on this upward streak of just getting better and better and better, and mapping out more of the process and figuring out how am I going to teach this to someone.
Yeah.
And so about a month and a half ago, something like that, we decided to start hiring some more cold callers because our cold calling campaigns were performing. And so, now I've proven that this is a successful model that we can have for our company. Let's start growing it. And this is around the time, perhaps a bit before, we hired an account executive full time.
Yeah.
And so she started bringing in some more cold calling clients, which means I have more work. And so we started hiring some cold callers, getting them onto our campaigns. Yeah. And my entire shift has been like, okay, what do I know? What have I figured out? How can I teach this to someone else? And that was a very easy process for me. There was like no training that went into it. I was just able to just intuitively offload this information. And now both these reps, I've got 2 right now. They're fully productive right now.
Cool.
One of them is like, he's getting real close to my personal best. So it's like, I've got, I'm happy for him too. And obviously like my main priority is to make reps that are better than me. So, I'm doing my job there, but it's like, man, this guy's he's going to beat me here, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So like you said, something that I'm a big advocate on is like with mental health and well-being. Then like similarly, like earlier this year, I went through like a bit of a bad patch a couple of months ago, actually about a month ago. So I've got my new team, and the thing for me is because I'm based in the UK, they're based out in Europe, and it's all done remotely. So I only get a very short snapshot when I'm sitting down with them to give them this training, to share this knowledge of, what I did as an SDR and what helped me out. But I give you an example. So imagine it's Tuesday. I'm about to go into like an SDR sync, to get the team motivated and get them pumped and say, these are the objectives for the week. This is what we're going to do as a team. Just before I step into that meeting, I get a phone call from my parents to say that my father's gone into hospital, not COVID related, but he wasn't too well. And they said because of COVID precautions, we're not allowed to visit him in hospital. That kind of sucks. So the good news is he's out of hospital, he's recovering, he's doing really well. But I had to kind of take that on board before stepping into my team meeting and just having to be cool. And then the next day on Wednesday, again, I'm about to go into SDR like one-to-ones and coaching on the individual contributors. And then I get an email from my son's school to say that he's been put into isolation. And this is just a few days before his birthday visit to my place. The news that might not happen. So I then go into one of my one-to-ones, and it was really nice. One of my SDRs said to me like, Neil, are you okay? And I just looked at him and said, no, I'm not. I'm going to be okay, but I'm not. And I think it's important to not just, it's just a natural thing that we do. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm okay. It's just a natural reaction that we have. But having that ability, and I've learned to do this more as a manager with my one-to-ones, is to always ask my team again, are you sure you're okay before we get down to business? And I think that's important. And then it got to Friday. I was about to record another podcast. And just before I went into the recording, I get a text message that a very close friend of mine had passed away due to prostate cancer. And I went into and I was just like, okay, so the funeral's coming up soon. An RIP to Andy, shouts out to him. I go into the session and my guest said like, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. And they looked at me and they're like, are you sure you're okay?
You're not good, man.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not. And they said, are you okay to record? I said, yeah, no, do you know what? I'm down for it. But the thing that really helps me out is exercise. So what I've learned off the back of that is in the mornings to give me that strength to go through the day and to deal with these things, to talk to people. Exercise is a great way to get that, the endorphins running in the head. Make sure that you're journaling, make sure, you're doing something and loving yourself a bit more, because you can only pour into others' cup once your cup is full, right? But equally, like with yourself, like where you're training these team members and they're coming up to like your ranks, it can be a little bit intimidating. So I knew I used to like be like head honcho and doing what I'm doing. And then you're training these young guys and girls into like becoming future salespeople, and you're giving them the training, and you're getting it, and they're getting these numbers. And I would sit there like, I never did that when I was at their point. I was like, that's freaking amazing, but it's freaking scary at the same time. But it's a pleasurable thing, I think, to be a manager, to share that knowledge and to see somebody take it and then make it their own and become successful. So for me, I've never really been motivated by money, but I'm motivated by people being successful and winning. And if I have a very small part in that, that makes me happy and inspired to like keep doing that thing as well. But being like a business development manager, like what is the thing that makes you happy about this role? Because it's not the easiest role, but why do you like it, Nicholas?
So to clarify, no, it's not the easiest role, but I just seem to have like a natural knack for this. So it's actually, it hasn't been too difficult for me, personally speaking. So what was the second part of the question?
So as in like taking on this role, so you've been the BDR, you've been the closer, now you've gone into this management position. This is actually a different way for a lot of people that start out in an SDR. It's a different career path. And I think like through my own experience, I think this has really helped me to become a better sales individual, because I'm learning stakeholder, I'm learning, how to manage different people. I'm learning how to, talk to people at different points in their careers and paths, same way that I'm speaking to prospects. And I think this is a really cool career path, but I'm not sure as many people are open to this, because they see this as, well, I'm putting my neck on the line for a whole bunch of other people and my success is determined by their success, right? So my question to you is like, what makes you happy about this role and what do you like about it? And if there's anybody out there thinking, I've been in a company for a couple of months, there's this team lead or management position coming, what advice would you give to them as to why this could be good for them?
Okay, great question. So what makes me happy about the role is I think we've touched on it. It's that human touch. It's seeing someone succeed in life. I think that's way more satisfying for me personally than making a sale. There's more of a community feeling to it, whereas a sale can feel quite personal, right?
Yeah.
So as far as advice that I would give and people transitioning, you need to keep it real. There's no room for fluff or for fakeness when you're training your reps. If there's something that's bothering you or something that's bothering them, you need to call it out. Like, this is your team. It's akin to going to battle together, because there's a lot of analogies you could draw to that. These are your men and women, right? You need to be on the same page. You need to understand them, not just strengths and weaknesses on the career, but emotionally as well. What kind of people are they? How do they respond to certain criticism? I think, and another reason I say that, this hasn't been the hardest position to go into is because a lot of the work was already done in my BDR phase. Those like social skills were solidified through that year of cold calling. And so now, like, man, having a conversation about like how you're feeling today is infinitely easier than having a conversation about, I don't know, like about like what kind of HR software you're going to use. It's infinitely easier. And so, yeah, you just need to keep it real, man, because if you don't, your reps are going to pick up on it. They're going to feel like they don't trust you. They're going to start withholding information. And that's just it's going to muddy the waters. And you won't know what course of action to take when a specific problem arises.
Yeah. I think, well, as a manager right now, you've just given me some solid advice to take on board as well. And I 100% agree. And I think like with these leadership positions, I think it's a great opportunity for, a lot of aspiring salespeople that are coming into tech and doing these jobs And like even within teams that I've gone into, I've seen particular SDRs where they've been that team player, they're helping out the newbies, they're being the buddy, they're giving training where it's not being asked of them, but they're just helping out other people, and people are able to go to them and confide. And I sit and I'm like, you'd make a great manager one day, or you'd make like a great team lead initially, and I'm trying to like steer them that way.
Yeah, right.
The same way my VP of operations, when I first went into my tech company, said, Neil, have you ever thought about being like an SDR manager? I was like, hell no, like, I'm not going to do that. Like,
wait, why? Why were you so opposed to it?
Good question. So the reason why I was so opposed, it was that fear of, putting my neck on the line selfishly for other people, because I didn't know if I could lead a team. I didn't know if I could motivate them. I didn't know if they would believe in me, and I didn't know if I could be successful in this versus, month on month, hitting my quota, overachieving, getting some good commission. I was like, there's a huge element of risk with this, right? But what I'm happy to say is he kind of twisted my arm because there was nobody else available. And I'd kind of been, similar like you said, I'd kind of been doing it myself already because I was that first SDR. I had to kind of just show everybody how I was doing it every time we had a new hire. So it was just like a natural progression, but there was a huge payoff to it. Because I found like being able to marry a bunch of people together to achieve a common goal, to be happy and celebrate everybody's successes. And when we had bad days, we'd help each other out. And that felt like you said, like a community, like a family knit unit.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was so much more satisfying rather than just trying to do it on my own as a lone wolf. So yeah, to listeners and watchers out there, like if this is something that piques your interest, definitely speak internally or speak to other people like Nicolas that has done it and pick their brain, because again, it can definitely, help you out in your career as well.
Yeah, and start taking initiative too, because if I notice one of my reps starting to coach other reps and saying the right things, that definitely makes a fantastic impression on me.
100%. I love it, dude.
Yeah.
Well, Nicolas, this has been a great conversation, and I have been looking forward to this, and I'm not feeling so sloggy after my vaccination this morning, but it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So a question that I always ask the guests is, what 3 bits of advice would you give to somebody who's just about to embark in their BDR, SDR career? What 3 bits of advice would you give them, sir?
Okay, so the first one, for me, the most important thing is being in the right mental state. So for me, it's exercising. For you, find whatever it is you need to, because you need that shield, that buffer zone between you and the bullshit that happens on a BDR position.
Yep.
You need that, otherwise it's going to get to you and you're going to implode. So find whatever helps you in that regard. The second, find whatever helps you perform good at your position. For me, it's being calm and acting as if something good happened on my job. For you, it's something else. It could be completely different. And the third one, I'd say don't forget to live your life, man. Like, this is just a position at the end of the day. You might be clocking in 9-10 hours, but you still have people outside of your work, and don't forget to live your moments and don't let your life pass by because you're so focused on your career.
Absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Nicolas. So yeah, definitely like health is wealth. Make sure that, if it's exercise, if it's meditation, if it's speaking to people, or, like me, listening to music to pump me up. And also making sure that, whatever, find your spark, find that thing that gets you up, that gets you hyped, that gets you happy, and hold on to that feeling like when you're doing this role, because it is very unforgiving, and you'd go through a hell of a lot of it is a hard role. And I say that to my reps, this isn't the easiest role, but if you put in, you'll get something out of it. And yeah, the realest bit of information that you just gave there as well, like you kept it real, where this is a job, it's a career, like it's not fully your life. And that's something I have to always remember, because sometimes I don't switch off and I'm spending up till however many hours, like 14-15 hours a day, trying to get stuff done so that I can work the continuous stakes. That I have to learn how to switch off as well and reconnect with reality, because a lot of time we're on screens, we're talking to people in inboxes, we're in the matrix. Like, step away and like have a healthy balance to it. Thank you so much, Nicolas. And are there any shout outs that you'd like to give on the show today, Nicolas?
Yeah, Shaheem Alam and Nilafar Nikju as well, both from Five Rings Marketing. Big shout outs to them.
Love it. Shouts out to the fellas and guys out there. And again, thank you so much to Shaheem for like introducing yourself and getting you on this show. I've been really enjoying it as well. So Nicolas, listeners, I want to say also thank you to all of you for listening and watching in. Remember, if you're listening onto your local podcast provider, please give us a rating and share out there. And equally, if you're on YouTube, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe down below. But Nicolas Griffiths, I wish you a pleasant weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing your career grow as we see things happening over at 5 Rings Marketing. And most importantly, Nicolas, I wish you happy selling, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Neil. And we'll definitely keep in touch because I had a really great time having this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, my man. Thank you so much for listening to our show today. If you work in tech sales and have a career or story that you'd love to share, then please email us at podcast@happyselling.io and we'll be in contact to book in a show.